What happens when a 22-year-old millionaire's son walks into my courtroom and threatens to have me fired? This arrogant young man thought his father's wealth could silence justice itself. But when I revealed a 25-year-old secret that connected us in ways he never imagined, what happened next broke him completely and reminded everyone watching that some debts go far deeper than money. Before I tell you how this entitled brat learned the hardest lesson of his life, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. This story about respect, humility, and the weight of family history will show you why some threats backfire in the most spectacular ways possible. And trust me, when you hear what his father owed me, you'll understand why this became the most talked about case in Providence courtroom history. It's a Tuesday morning in my courtroom, and I'm reviewing what appears to be a simple parking violation. Brandon Ashford, age 22, cited for parking his $200,000 Lamborghini in a handicapped space outside the Providence Children's Hospital. The citation notes that he blocked access for nearly 4 hours while attending what the officer described as a cryptocurrency conference at the adjacent hotel. The moment Brandon walks through my courtroom doors, everyone notices. The designer suit that costs more than most people's annual salary. The platinum watch catching the fluorescent lights. The way he surveys my courtroom like he's evaluating real estate he might purchase. But it's not the luxury that fills the room with tension. It's the attitude, the dismissive glance at the other defendants waiting their turn. The way he checks his phone repeatedly, as if these proceedings are merely an inconvenience interrupting more important matters. I look up from my paperwork with the patience I've developed over 3 decades on this bench. Mr. Ashford, you're here regarding a parking violation, specifically parking in a handicapped space at Providence Children's Hospital. How do you plead? Brandon doesn't even look at me directly when he responds. His voice carries the casual arrogance of someone who's never faced real consequences. He speaks while scrolling through his phone, treating my courtroom like a minor inconvenience. Not guilty, obviously. That parking space wasn't clearly marked, and besides, I was only there for a few hours. No harm done. He glances around the courtroom with visible disdain, as if wondering why he has to share breathing space with what he clearly considers lesser people. The officer's report tells a different story. The handicap placard was clearly visible. Security cameras show Brandon examining the sign before deliberately choosing to park there anyway. Most damning, the hospital staff had to turn away a wheelchair-bound child for a scheduled appointment because Brandon's Lamborghini blocked the accessible ramp. Mr. Ashford, I say, reviewing the evidence carefully, the citation includes photographs showing clear handicapped signage. The parking space you occupied is specifically designed for wheelchair accessibility. A child missed their medical appointment because of your choice. Brandon finally looks at me, and what I see in his eyes is something I've encountered before, but never this brazenly. Complete dismissal of authority, pure entitlement wrapped in expensive clothing. Judge, with all due respect, I don't think you understand who you're dealing with here. My father is Anthony Ashford of Ashford Technologies. We employ over 3,000 people in this state. The taxes my family pays probably fund your salary for the next decade. The courtroom goes completely quiet. Even the court reporter pauses, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. In 30 years on this bench, I've seen arrogance, but this is something else entirely. This is a young man who genuinely believes money exempts him from accountability. I remove my glasses, a gesture that anyone familiar with my courtroom knows signals that something significant is about to happen. Mr. Ashford, your father's business success is irrelevant to this proceeding. You violated parking regulations that exist to protect disabled individuals' access to medical care. That's when Brandon makes his catastrophic mistake. He leans forward, his voice taking on what he probably thinks is a threatening tone. Look, Judge, I'm trying to be reasonable here, but if you're going to be difficult about this, maybe you should consider who has the power to make your life complicated. My father has connections. He knows the mayor, the governor, the people who decide court budgets. I'd hate for this to become a problem for you. The gallery erupts in whispers. A man in the third row audibly gasps. A woman shakes her head in disbelief. But I feel something else entirely, a chill of recognition, because suddenly, looking at this arrogant young man, I see something familiar in his features. The same jawline, the same dark eyes, though filled with an entitlement I remember being absent in someone else who shared those features. "Mr. Ashford," I say slowly, deliberately. "Did you say your father is Anthony Ashford?" Brandon's chest puffs with pride. "That's right. Anthony Ashford, CEO of Ashford Technologies. Maybe you've heard of him? He practically built half this city." I stand up from my bench and walk around to the front. When I do this, everyone in my courtroom knows something extraordinary is about to happen. "Brandon, I think it's time you learned something about your father that he apparently never told you. 25 years ago, your father was a very different man. He wasn't the successful CEO you know today. He was a struggling construction worker, recently laid off, with a pregnant wife and mounting bills. He'd just lost his apartment and was 3 days away from having his family evicted with nowhere to go." Brandon's smirk begins to fade. His confident posture wavers slightly. I continue, my voice carrying the weight of decades-old memory. "Your father came to my law office, not my courtroom, because back then I practiced family law. He couldn't afford my fees, but he was desperate. He'd been wrongfully terminated from his construction job, and his former employer was refusing to pay his final wages. $7,000 he was owed, money his family desperately needed." The courtroom is absolutely silent now. Brandon's face has gone from arrogant confidence to confused uncertainty. "I took your father's case pro bono, Brandon, for free. Not because I had to, but because I could see he was a good man facing an impossible situation. We fought that case for 6 months. I spent countless hours, used my own resources, fought against a company with expensive lawyers who thought they could crush a working man." Brandon tries to interrupt, but I hold up my hand. "When we won that case, your father broke down crying in my office. He hugged me and said something I'll never forget. 'Mr. Caprio, you saved my family. My son will never have to go hungry because of what you did today. I promise you, if I ever make something of myself, I'll make sure he knows what real integrity looks like.'" Brandon is no longer the arrogant young man who walked into my courtroom. He's standing there, stunned, as the foundation of his privileged worldview crumbles around him. That $7,000 allowed your father to start his first business. A small construction company that grew into the empire you're so proud of today. Everything you have, the cars, the clothes, the attitude, exists because a judge showed your father compassion when he had nothing. I walk closer to Brandon, and for the first time since he entered my courtroom, he looks genuinely afraid. "So when you stand in my courtroom and threaten to have me fired, when you tell me your father has the power to make my life difficult, you're threatening the man who made your father's success possible, the man who kept your family from being homeless before you were even born." Brandon's hands are shaking now. His voice, when he finally finds it, is barely a whisper. "I didn't know. He never told me." I return to my bench, but the lesson isn't over. "Your father made me a promise 25 years ago, Brandon. He promised his son would know what integrity looks like. Looking at you today, standing in my courtroom, threatening the man who saved your family, I have to wonder if he failed to keep that promise." Brandon collapses into the defendant's chair. The arrogance is completely gone, replaced by something approaching horror as he realizes the magnitude of his mistake. "I'm going to call your father now, Brandon, not to get you in trouble, but because he needs to know what kind of man his son has become." The call connects within minutes. The entire courtroom can hear both sides of the conversation as I put it on speaker. "Tony, this is Frank Caprio. Your son Brandon is in my courtroom right now, and I think you need to hear what just happened." When I finish explaining Brandon's threats, his arrogant behavior, his dismissal of disabled children's needs, the silence on the other end of the phone stretches for what feels like eternity. I can hear Anthony's breathing, heavy and labored, as if someone just punched him in the stomach. 25 years of building an empire, and this is what his success has produced. A son who threatens the very man who made it all possible. Finally, Anthony Ashford's voice fills my courtroom, heavy with shame and disbelief. "Frank, I am so sorry. I don't know what happened to the values I tried to teach him. You saved my family when no one else would. You're the reason my son has any privileges to be arrogant about." Brandon is crying now, openly, in front of a courtroom full of strangers. His father continues, Brandon, if you're listening, you just disrespected the most important man in our family's history. Judge Caprio is the reason you exist in comfort. He's the reason you had food, shelter, education, opportunity. And you threatened him? The emotional weight in the courtroom is overwhelming. People are wiping away tears. Even the bailiff looks moved. Anthony Ashford's voice becomes firm with parental authority. Frank, whatever sentence you think is appropriate, I support completely. My son needs to learn what I obviously failed to teach him: respect, humility, and gratitude. The sentence I deliver reflects not just Brandon's parking violation, but his complete failure to understand the responsibilities that come with privilege. $500 fine for the parking violation, 100 hours of community service, specifically assisting disabled individuals with transportation needs. And most importantly, Brandon will spend every Saturday for the next 6 months volunteering at the same children's hospital where he blocked access with his Lamborghini. But the most powerful moment comes after the sentencing, when Brandon approaches my bench with tears still streaming down his face. Judge Caprio, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought money meant I could do whatever I wanted. I was wrong about everything. 3 months later, Brandon returns to my courtroom, not as a defendant, but to update me on his community service. The arrogant young man who once threatened me has transformed into someone who understands what privilege really means: the responsibility to help others, not to lord over them. He tells me about Sarah, a 12-year-old girl with cerebral palsy who he now drives to therapy sessions twice a week. The same parking space he once blocked with his Lamborghini is now where he carefully positions a wheelchair-accessible van he purchased with his own money. His father accompanies him, and for the first time in 25 years, Anthony Ashford and I shake hands again. This time, not as desperate client and helping lawyer, but as two men who understand that real success isn't measured in money, but in the character we pass to the next generation. The letter Brandon wrote to the disabled child whose appointment he caused to be missed becomes a lesson in accountability that I share with every entitled defendant who thinks wealth equals exemption from responsibility. This case reminds me why I've dedicated my life to this bench. Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about teaching people to be better than they were when they walked through my door. Brandon Ashford walked in as a threat-making entitled brat and left as a young man finally understanding what his father learned 25 years ago: that kindness, respect, and humility are the only currency that truly matters in this life. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come from understanding that our connections to each other run deeper than we know, and that the person you're attempting to dismiss might be the very reason your life exists as it does today.